Hello, welcome back. In this episode we're going to be looking at how to check your nuts. We thought it'd be, during lockdown, it'd be a good time to get all the gear out and do a full kit inspection. So we're going to be looking at how you look through and safely check your wires and what to look out for as well. Obviously these are one of your passive bits of protection as you're placing as you're lead climbing, and it's very possible that it's going to be taking some lead falls at some point in isolation. So knowing that each of your nuts is able to withstand the forces involved in that is worth doing your kit inspection quite regularly. There are a couple of things to look at during the inspection. The first thing is the metal, and then also the wire itself. And it's really good to be systematic whilst you're going through, because obviously you could end up with quite a large rack of nuts. So get a little system in your head where you're going to check certain aspects of it first and then go through the nut in sequence. So I always like to start off with the head of the nut and checking the top of the metal and also the base, and then obviously the other four sides as well. You're looking for any cracks, any deformation in the metal, any significant changes to what it should normally look like as to when you bought it new. You can get superficial scratching on it. Obviously that happens as you place it in the rock and you're taking out and things. So if the anodizing is a little bit scratched, then don't worry about that too much. What you should be worried about is if there's a significant crack in the metal, or if the shape of it is deformed ever so slightly in any way. So look at the top as well. Try also, if you can, move the wire, to push the wire up so you can get a good look at the very top of the metal head where the loop sits over the top and hides that. So you kind of want to be able to see everything with these nuts. So push the wire out the way and check again in there as well. If you have got sort of hollow nuts, then take a look inside and all the way around as best you can. Again, checking for those features of signs of corrosion, cracks, burrs, etc. If that's all good, then move on to the wire. And again, kind of similar things. You're looking for any deformation in the wires, any major separation or singular strands that have been cut and are poking out. And you probably feel them before you see them. And then any signs of corrosion as well. And again, move the wire along so you get a good look all the way throughout all the strands, all the way around the strand itself. And check down this way as well. And pay particular attention to the ends. So the two looped ends will start to separate over time. A little bit of separation is kind of normal. That happens as the wire gets used, but obviously too much where it starts to really separate and the strands are taking strain almost as independent bundles, then that's probably time to start retiring your nut as well. So it's worth noting at this point that not all nuts actually have the ability for the heads to slide up and down. So the offsets, for instance, the offsets are actually glued in place, so don't go to great lengths to try and dig out the wire, because it's actually just kind of permanently in situ in there. So yeah, just be aware of that. But you can actually spy through the holes in some places and check the rest of the wire. Okay, so that's a pretty good specimen. So that's a systematic way that you might go through the nut, having a look at it, checking for any corrosion, wear, cracks or loose strands, depending on whether it's the metal head or the wire itself. If the wire is a little bit deformed, so for instance, here for instance, on this offset, if you have got a little bit of deformation, or sometimes if the nut's been taken out quite roughly, the wire might have bent. If you're going to reshape it by hand. If you take pliers to it or do anything with other metal devices, you could risk actually breaking or straining the strands and obviously weakening them. So that obviously weakens the entire loading capability of the nut. So tease it, if you can, gently by hand, until it does sort of realign straight. If it can't, then it's time to retire it again, because if it's been bent and deformed out of shape completely and won't go back, then obviously time to retire it. So it's more or less straight now. So, doing a nut inspection, we've got some specimens here which we'll have a look through. So this one, for instance, little brass one, the wire itself has been deformed to a point where it's no longer able to actually sit back happily in place. No matter how hard we try, we can't actually get it back in alignment anymore. So because of that, we're going to actually look to retire that one, just because of the displacement of the wire. The metal head is fine, which is a bit sad, but it's just the wire that we're a little bit concerned about. Second is this one here, and again, actually the wire itself this time is in not too bad a condition. It's quite an old nut, but actually the head has started to show signs of corrosion, so the metal itself has started to have some pitting effect, and also inside the inner part of the nut you can actually start to see some corrosion taking place as well. So the metal head itself has been compromised, which means again time for retirement. This one, metal head, perfect condition. In fact, it looks pretty much nearly brand new. The problem is I think this one's been left out for quite a number of days because the metal head's been buried, but the wire has been poking out and has suffered quite a lot of corrosion all the way around the strands. And again, just some further corrosion on the wire itself. Metal head as well has started to have some pitting effect as well. So again, there's probably some corrosion going on or taking place with the metal head. This one is a very unique piece. In fact, the rust has started to form a layer over the top of it, so you can't see the strands that well anymore. So these examples here aren't actually from our rack. These are examples of nuts that we've found en route, which we've collected and taken away off of the routes. So yeah, we don't know the history or anything like that, but we can tell from an inspection how poor a condition they actually are. So they're not going to be used, but they're going to be good examples put thrown. So that's just a few things to look out for when you're checking your nuts, when you're inspecting your rack of wires. Do go through each nut systematically, and if you are in any doubt about any of your wires at all, then it's best to retire it and replace it. When you're talking about potentially taking a whipper off or something, you want that peace of mind that your gear is good and it's safe, and it's going to hold you. So don't mess about with it, throw it away, and then get a new one if you have found anything like a crack, a corrosion anywhere, or significant deformation of the metal or the wire. Stored correctly, so these should be stored out of direct sunlight, away from any sort of corrosive substances. So if you're somebody who likes to keep your rack in the boot of your car, just make sure the petrol can's not sitting next to it, that your gear's actually in a sort of waterproof bag tucked out the way somewhere, and certainly away from any battery acid or anything like that. Also, if you've been out sea cliff climbing as well, it's worth just dunking your nuts in cold water and just giving them a good rinse out, just to get any excess salt or salt water out of them, especially in between the strands as well. If you think they've been sprayed with salt water, if you've had a big wave come up and splash you, then it might be worth soaking them overnight in cold water just to really dilute and rinse out any salt, because that'll accelerate any corrosion or rust. Nuts themselves, stored correctly and well looked after, can last indefinitely because the metal itself doesn't have necessarily a lifespan on them like soft goods, like a harness for instance. So yeah, well looked after, they could last a very long time. We have been doing a series about how to look after your climbing gear, your rack, so do go and check that out on our YouTube channel. We do other videos and vlogs and tutorials, so please do check them out on our channel as well. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye! So it's good to check your nuts quite regularly. That's kind of... Hello Siri. Such a rude Siri. It's always good to tease your nuts by hand.